Good afternoon, everyone, or actually good morning, as I'm starting off here at around 11 o'clock to our PMA-CIBC Summit Series. This one on innovation in housing, a really fabulous topic, going to be moderated by the spectacular Jeanhy Shim and an amazing panel, and she'll tell you all about that in just a minute or two. I'm just delighted to be here with you after we took a little holiday there in August, and we're back now for this session and then one final session in November. And I'm thrilled to be able to report to you about kind of just the opening remarks here of how this market has unfolded. Well, in between, we had something going on there. There was an election, I think, wasn't there? Somebody told me about an election going on. You know, these opposing views pulling like a tug of war on a rope, and at 36 days of that intensity, and in the end, the rope won. But one of the most amazing parts of the rope was housing affordability and supply became a federal election issue. Rarely is it a federal policy area of jurisdiction. This is normally the purview of the province. The municipalities are a child of the province, and those provincial policy statements are the ones that have the influence over housing supply. The feds, as most political animals have done over our history, is feed the demand engine. So what they've done, and most politicians do this because it's the easiest thing to do, is to create stimulus in demand, whether that's tax issues or in savings accounts for first-time buyers, to influences on shared accommodation, all of it generally driven towards demand. And it's what we need the least of at the moment. What we're facing is a supply crisis. It has been a supply crisis over decades, as long as I've been talking about this anyway. And my goodness, the only period that we were not in supply crisis was the early 1990s in a major recession. And I look back upon that period, 91 to 95, when we elected an NDP government in Ontario, and Bob Rae was leader of the NDP and engaged John Sewell, former mayor of Toronto, to do an overhaul of the Planning Act. What that caused, the unintended consequence, was that the industry together just dramatically tried to get ahead, grandfather their draft plans of subdivision. And so we, in the period from 91 to 94, actually just absolutely quadrupled the supply of product available within the marketplace. It was an unintended consequences. The changes to the Planning Act, as draconian as they were outlined by Sewell, never happened. A new government with Mike Harris came into play in 95, and we sat with the most spectacular supply of all product. I think at the time, I think back, I'd have to look at the notes, but I can remember seeing that there was a 100-year supply of high-rise product for Peterborough, for example. It was just outrageous. Hundreds of thousands of units available within the market. Interesting correlation to price. During that period, as we came out of recession in 1989, and a deep one it was, and lasted a long time here in Canada, much shorter in the US. But that recession, combined with this massive supply opportunity, housing prices declined on average 40%. Many of you weren't around perhaps in this audience to experience such a change, but driven both by recessionary pressures from a speculative market in the late 1980s to a very high speculation, combined with this tremendous unintended flow of supply. Well, I'd never be an advocate of course, prices adjusting by 40%, but interestingly enough, we've adjusted that just in the last 2 years. In our last 2 years, our price points have moved 50% on detached, 30% on townhouse product, somewhat less, about 13.5, 14% on high-rise condo, much better supply of that product in the market. And the fear factor in COVID actually caused a little bit of flattening and depreciation of product on the high-rise condo in in the early parts of the COVID lockdowns. So it reacted a little different as that product was hit so hard by the loss of employment in the service industry particularly, and that's where there was a high degree of rental in high-rise condo. The investor got a little nervous and a lot of product came to market and prices eased off and rents eased off. That has all disappeared. Now we are in September of 2021, and I was we watch this of course every day in the marketplace as it's unfolding. But in that period of the last 6 months, the market had been reasonably flat. We thought we were entering kind of a more stabilized environment. Prices hadn't moved much. Supply began to normalize, not supply, I'm sorry, absorption, sales began to normalize, and supply remained very, very tight. It came up just a little wee bit through the summer months, but effectively now, really, as we entered September, 9,000 resale listings on a market that should be in balance of between 25 and 28,000 units, and there is 9,000. Absorption in the month of September held around the normal level of around 9,000 units. This is off from a year ago. You'll see percentage change notations from the marketplace of the volumes are off from a year ago. Well, that was in the middle of the COVID surge, and clearly we're back to a normal levels of absorption. But with such little supply, it's so tight, there are only 1 month supply, 9,000 units out there in the resale market against the market absorbing 9,000 sales in September. Prices again surged in September. I didn't think there was room. I thought we were going to see a consumer, as we felt really through the previous 6 months, a kind of pushback on price and a more reluctance on the demand, very much more difficult to find a qualified buyer as prices have moved 50% since September of 2019. So in a 2-year period, we have really blown the roof off. Now, this isn't special to Toronto. This has happened all throughout North America, and partly driven by the demand push of COVID, of drive till you qualify, and the theory of I'm out of here, I hate the place I'm in, and let's move. And of course, that created a kind of surge in demand. And all along, we were fighting the supply engine. It just been sputtering. A build study that just released several months ago pointed to the average length of time from the purchase of a piece of dirt to the actual delivery of a new home in a 905 typical subdivision is 11 years. For high-rise condo, it's 10 years. So here we are in this incredible growth market of Toronto, this island in North America. Unfortunately, we're winning the race, the one we don't want to, of being the most unaffordable city in North America. We're sitting at number 5 in the world. We're number 2 in North America. And so what you're feeling or sensing right now is a buoyant market continuing. And if I'm in a bubble right now, I'm certainly feeling like one, certainly through the fall, where market release of whatever we release will move very, very quickly. There is just nothing available for inordinate levels of demand. And the federal government, provincial government, and others looking at areas to stimulate demand further. This is wrong-headed. We've got to focus on the supply crisis. You also have to focus on housing affordability as it sits, and what does that mean? What is the actual definition of housing affordability? We did a comparison back to 1991 and different income levels, of course, different household formation component parts. Overall, the 1991 house was more affordable than today, but not by a whole lot. And in fact, if I take out the OSFI rules, which distort the qualifying requirements, it was just as affordable as 91, just slightly less, not significantly less. So we've really, by government decree, bent the affordability equation. Today, municipal charges, taxes, education levies on a new single family house well exceed and approaching $200,000 per unit. So you've got this kind of artificial push on the part of municipalities to try to find, quite rightly, try to finance their roads and infrastructure, but at the same time, a cost push underlying. Together with a one little item that just raised its nice little ugly head for the first time in a long time, and that's inflation. Tremendous pressure on materials and labor. What this means is a further push on price, regardless of demand and supply issues. This will all be material and labor driven, and that will continue. We will see sooner than we ever expected movement by Bank of Canada to raise interest rates. This will be important to kind of put a level or hold on these little surges we're seeing in prices. Very, very important, and needs to be done, of course, very carefully so that we don't topple ourselves off a cliff from what has been a very rapid escalation in values. It's perhaps not to be unexpected that there's going to be some kind of a correction in the near future. I'm going to suggest it's summer to fall of next year. It'll all be in line with interest rates. So here we are in September of 2021, as we now reach back to normal levels of activity. COVID appears to, fingers and toes crossed, to beginning to be behind us. And this fall and through next spring are going to be very buoyant for the new housing industry. There is nothing that gets in the way, save and except movement of interest rates. But even that usually causes a little surge in activity just prior to a rate move or just as it happens. So I expect, combining with the movement of immigration back to what will now be world record levels of 400,000 a year, 1.2 million projected over the next 3 years. We actually will hit over 200,000 this year, just based on new government policy that's been introduced, allowing temporary residents to apply for permanent status. So once that fades out in November, that probably will be extended. You watch, that one will probably get pushed ahead a little bit. But the big picture will be in the new year, a return to high levels of immigration. So the household formation side, the demands push side, the interference by, please, God forbid, don't let Trudeau become a home builder. Oh my God, he's promising 1 million new homes, and hopefully he doesn't put a shovel in the ground. But and it's relied, let the industry loose. So there's the picture. The picture's actually a really good one looking forward, at least in the near term. And then the unknown factors of concern looking into 2022 will be inflation, materials, labor, the impact on price, and perhaps an adjustment in the market from that. So watch for that coming. Let me turn this over to the fabulous Jeanhy Shim. Jeanhy's partner and now president of PMA-CIBC, joined our firm earlier in the year. She'd been practicing as Toronto Housing Lab, which still is there, doing some really innovative housing services and consulting service to the industry. She's been 28 years at this business, so very, very experienced. And I call her my data geek. She keeps sending me stuff that's so deep and integrated. I just blows me away. But what a perfect moderator for this session on housing innovation, and what an important subject in these times. Let me turn it over to and welcome you all today to our session. And let me turn it over to Jeanhy Shim. Jeanhy, the show is yours.
Thank you so much, Andy, for a very generous introduction. And welcome everyone to the PMA-CIBC Summit Series today. As Andy mentioned, my name is Jeanhy Shim, and I'm really honored and pleased to be here today with you. I'd like to get started with a land acknowledgement. As a Toronto-based organization, we acknowledge that the land we are meeting on virtually today is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and we are all treaty people. Many of us have come here as settlers, as immigrants, and newcomers in this generation or generations past. We'd also like to acknowledge and honor those who came here involuntarily, particularly those who are descended from those who brought here through enslavement. And PMA Brethour also stands in solidarity with Indigenous communities, demanding action and accountability for the ongoing legacy of the residential school system. So please, to better understand the meaning behind this land acknowledgement, we encourage you to learn more about the traditional territories where you live, learn, and work. So again, welcome everyone. So pleased to have you all here today. We have a very exciting session here that we're going to be talking about how innovation in housing is reshaping the market. We brought together 3 visionary developers to discuss how their alternative business models could reshape and are reshaping the future of real estate. We're going to learn how out-of-the-box thinking can help address the ongoing affordability crisis and build innovative solutions to alternative housing across the province. So we have with us today, some housekeeping measures here and some thank you to our sponsors. First, we need to thank all of our sponsors who are making today's event possible. I don't know if we're going to be putting them up on the screen, but we have, you'll see them up on the screen. Build, Next Home, Schneider, Rugio, Spencer, Milborn, NextGen, Balcony Sagan, Aurea Alliance, Buzz Home, Westmount. So again, hopefully we'll get them up on the screen later, but thank you to all of our sponsors who are making this event possible today. And a few housekeeping notes. Everyone is being muted. If you do have any questions, please put them in the chat box in the Q&A, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. And if you are interested in watching any of our previous webinars, they are available through the PMA-CIBC website. So let's get started here. We have 3 amazing speakers with us here today. Corey Hodgson, founder and CEO of Core Development Group. Kristen Wilkinson, who is Vice President of Brand at Parkbridge Lifestyle Communities, and Daniel Gurr, who's Chief Development Officer at Options for Homes. So why don't we start with each of the speakers, if you can just kind of briefly introduce yourselves and what you do, and give our participants some more background on yourselves, maybe about a minute each. Corey, do you want to kick us off?
Thanks, Jeanhy, and thanks, Andy, for the words. It's great, always great hearing from you guys. And Andy, on the inflationary construction cost point, I'm cheek and tongue saying this, but I'm spreading a rumor of a deflationary construction period, and I certainly hope as the supply chain comes back on and as things sort of normalize, with fingers and toes crossed, that we at the very least see a bit of a flatlining in pricing. I do think the COVID trend there has perhaps put a little bit of a stint in supply. There was 12 months or so of, I think, every developer, person in the industry sort of not knowing what was going on and sort of put pens down on a lot of new opportunities. So perhaps that supply chain will help normalize some of the inflationary things, but please spread the rumor. I'm Corey Hodgson, CEO of Core Developments. Core Developments is a residential developer. We focus mostly on 3 asset classes, all within residential: condo, multi-res apartment, and single-family rental. We're really focused on trying to address the demand for more affordable residential living solutions, and we're trying to bring on supply of attainable residential product, both in suburban and urban markets.
Thanks, Corey. Kristen, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Absolutely. Thanks, Jeanny. So hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Wilkinson from Parkbridge. A little bit about me. I started my real estate career with IntraWest in Whistler in 1998. And what could be more fun than IntraWest in Whistler in 1998? So I was hooked, been doing it ever since. And it happens to be the same year that Parkbridge was formed. In 1998, Parkbridge was formed with the acquisition of a single land lease property that was purchased in Alberta. We sometimes hear MHC, manufactured housing, sometimes mobile housing, or sometimes good old trailer park. That was the impetus in Alberta, 680 land lease sites for about $1 million. But if you fast forward to today, Parkbridge owns and manages 25,000 land lease sites with a portfolio worth $1.8 billion of assets under management. 51% of those are Ontario, to give you an idea. And the portfolio mix is 19% resorts, 36% family residential, 45% retirement residential. I just want to also note that in 2011, BCI, the British Columbia Investment Management Corporation, purchased Parkbridge. So we are solely owned by BCI, and basically added to its huge real estate portfolio, this IPP portfolio that is a very slow and steady, resilient return to its stakeholders. To give you an idea, the portfolio occupancy in 2021 was 98.7%, and that's, you know, after the shock of COVID and other things that would have been an incredible stress test for this asset class. Quadrille, you know, is a name much bigger than Parkbridge that people know in the industry. They manage the BCI real estate portfolio, and we are under that portfolio. So it's a great big sister to have. They hold positions on our board, and we rely on them for support. That gives you a good idea.
Thanks, Kristen. And Daniel, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for having me here. It's a pleasure to be in the company with the other panelists, Jeanhy, Corey, Kristen. It's great to be here together. So my name is Dan Guerra. I'm the Chief Development Officer at Options for Homes. And as such, I get the honor to work with almost everybody in my office for anything related to a development, everything from acquisition through to completion. Really, I get to get involved in. So it's a great place to be. Options for Homes is Canada's largest developer of affordable homeownership condominiums. And I think we'll get into the model a little bit later, but you know, the fundamental of the model is a financing program that we offer a down payment loan for purchasers to get into ownership earlier than they otherwise could. You know, size and scale, we've completed 13 projects to date. We have another under construction right now and several other under development. So we're busy, and it's great to be here. So thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. So let's get started with the questions today. So the first question I'd like to ask our panelists is, what makes your company unique in the real estate marketplace? What is the burning question that you are trying to address, or the problem that you're trying to solve for? And what is your alternative business model, approach, or solution? I know some of you touched on it briefly, but I guess we can get into more of a detailed discussion now. Corey, can you kick us off?
Sure. I first of all, I hate thinking of myself as unique, but you know, and we're, you know, I don't mean to diminish anything, but we're playing in the residential real estate space, and I don't want to be shot in saying this, but it's a relatively not unique asset class. We, you know, my fellow panelists and many others are doing unique things within the asset class. And are trying to innovate and think outside of the box. For us, those are micro opportunities in innovation. The problem we're trying to solve is the supply problem that Andy spoke about in detail, and affordability issues. So bringing on products that are attainable for the, you know, the mass population. And you know, for us, the twist is we're doing single family rental, new supply of single family rental across Ontario. You know, it's an asset class that is undeveloped here in Canada. It's a major asset class, one of the fastest growing through the US. The fundamentals in Ontario or Canada are as strong or stronger than in the US. And, you know, 80% of millennials, they don't want to live in an apartment or a high rise. They want to grow their kids or families, or even young professionals. They want to grow up in a community like they did, you know, send their kids to a school like they did. And there's not a lot of access to do that. So we're heavily focused on bringing on single family rentals into the marketplace, new units. And the other slight innovation or twist to the business model is co-living. We are developing 4 co-living products today. mid-rise buildings downtown Toronto. So that's our sort of urban type solution. I think an interesting stat is 60% of people renting in Toronto right now are roommating. That's driven by them seeking more affordable ways to live. That usually looks like one person will rent a 2-bedroom apartment, or even a lot of cases 1 bedroom plus a den, and they'll sublease the other unit out to a friend, or in most cases a stranger. So co-living is, again, it's an asset class that is developed and becoming well developed in the rest of the world. There are some examples here. Dream has a product in Ottawa that they're doing, and there are a few other sort of players happening in Ontario and Canada that we're aware of, but it's a relatively undeveloped space, and I can speak about it further later, but we are co-living allows for that roommating to happen without some of the friction points where people fight about. So it's an institutionally managed building and project that allows roommating to happen, where people don't fight about cleaning or cleaning supplies or Wi-Fi or furniture, things that people fight about. So we feel really strongly about the space, and happy to talk about it more further.
Thank you, Corey. Kristen, can you share with us what makes your company unique in the marketplace?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Corey, I'm glad you brought up the stat about low density single family housing, because we're seeing a lot of demand for the same. And it's so hard to have that affordability piece and not add density. So one of the, again, we're trying to solve for affordability, and our model is leased land. I think of it as the missing middle. We all have heard that term, I think, in the industry. But if you take renting the land, owning the house, directly in between renting and full ownership or freehold, that is land lease. So we remain the landlord of that land over time. We're professional property managers and make sure that asset is maintained. But the customer owns the home, so they can continue to gain equity in that home. The question we get asked all the time is, isn't that a depreciating asset? We do have lots of examples where the equity in that home increases. It depends on the market that you're in, and no, it won't be as much likely as if you own the land, but it allows that person to step into home ownership for the first time, still gaining equity, or it allows them to ease out of home ownership at a time when they have gained equity, potentially in a much larger home that doesn't suit their needs at this point. So they're taking that equity off the table, moving into a situation in the type of housing that they can age in place, that they have a connected community that's ground oriented. So giving them a healthy, connected community and active lifestyle, and also gives them that financial stability. So there's many examples of land lease globally, but that prevailing perception in North America is the manufacturer mobile homes. I wanted Melissa to share a slide. Melissa, if you can pull up that first slide, because today land lease looks like this, or looks like a neighborhood that you wouldn't have any idea it's leased land. So we do have lots of different types of communities in our portfolio. This happens to be in Kelowna, in an absolutely spectacular location. It's traditionally built, stick-built homes on a golf course. And this is absolutely our highest end product, or our most expensive product, but it's a full gamut in terms of product types.
Thank you, Kristen. Very interesting model. And Dan, can you share with us a bit more your business model, or what makes Options for Homes so unique?
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like we're all taking a different twist and driving at the same thing, but our business is based on delivering market quality condos to end users. So I think that's different than the marketplace in general. Like we really only sell to end users. So we're not an investor-driven model at all. Every purchaser in our projects all have the right and the opportunity to borrow money to help with the down payment. They don't have to take it, but it's part of our offering. And, you know, at a corporate level, rather than distributing profits to shareholders, all profits go back into the next development and the next development. So profits generated or surpluses generated on one development go back into our fund, which then gets reinvested into new projects. So that's sort of the unique spin, I think. But, you know, the burning question that we're trying to respond to, again, is not that different than everybody. We're trying to create housing for, you know, as Kristen said, the missing middle. It's people in middle, moderate income, fully employed, should be able to own a home, can't own a home because of forces outside of their control. And we're trying to create an opportunity for those that get priced out of the market. And, you know, this is all achieved through the model. On the cost side, I'll go with Corey's rumor that perhaps costs are going down. But in the meantime, there's a bunch of costs that we can't control: land, government costs. Certainly, inflation is real on that side. But we work with a phenomenal builder that helps us value engineer our projects. We make sure that our buildings are well thought out, good amenities. You won't find rooftop pools or 24-hour concierge in our buildings. So we try to deliver a product that you can live in forever, but you're not encumbered with a high carrying cost. But really, like I said in my introduction, the thing that really makes options unique is our down payment loan program. And I'll just go through real quick. Purchasers need a minimum of 5% to buy with us. Our organization and our fund will provide up to 10 to 15% as a down payment loan for purchasers. That loan is secured in second position on title on closing. And that loan does not require interest or principal payments to be made. It's a shared appreciation loan. If and when the owner decides to move or refinance and repay the loan's repaid with its share of appreciation. So instead of interest, we share in the property value. And as a result, people can get into owning a home with less down. They don't have, 95% loan to value mortgages with crazy CMHC insurance on it or anything like that, and keeps the carrying costs low. So that's the model, and that's how we deal with it.
Wow, really interesting. And how, yes, all three of you're addressing the issues of affordability, attainability, but from different angles. Really interesting, all these different approaches. Second question I wanted to ask is, how did you get started? I know a lot of us out here, we have ideas and things that we want to try, but getting it started is hard. What were some of the main challenges and obstacles that you had to address, and how did you overcome them? Were there any key factors enabling your success, or key supporters, or any kind of tips that you can share with some of our viewers on how you guys got started? And why don't we start with Corey?
Thanks, Jeanhy. Just going back to the last question for a second, there's two parts I forgot to highlight. Was co-living tries to solve towards a 30 to 40% discount. So if you had two buildings side by side, similar buildings, one was a co-living, one was a traditional apartment, the tenant of the co-living building should expect to see a 30 to 40% discount living in the co-living building versus the building next door. So I thought that was important to highlight. And then the single family rental homes, we're adding at least one unit to every home that we're purchasing. And that secondary unit is very close or hits the 30% of income and technically falls under the affordability guidelines for the province. But those are two important points I forgot to address. The next question, how did we get started? I'm fortunate and unfortunate that I'm the third generation real estate developer in my family. Fortunate that there was a lot of experience that was passed on, and unfortunate in that none of those companies were passed on. They were kind of rolled up and disassembled, for lack of a better word. That also gave us a bit of an opportunity to create a new path. And I'll say, in terms of the challenges, aside from the fact that we had essentially a zero-sum balance sheet, status quo and track record were two of the biggest challenges that I've had to face in my career of starting. Status quo is the Achilles heel of innovation. And I think the fact that we were not generationally prescribed what to do gave us the ability to challenge the status quo in our own, unique way, like Dan and Kristen have done also. But I'd say that was one of the harder parts, especially developing, into new asset classes and new product types. The general why try anything new when it's it's not broken, or whatever, when it works fine this way is a challenge. Track record was another one. We didn't have anything to point to. We've assembled a great team with tons of track record, but the company, it's still a relatively young company. It's about 8 years old. We are now developing a track record, but in the beginning it wasn't there. So that really meant we had to find people that believed in our vision, that were objective with our views and the products and why we thought they were great products, and really have the resilience to stick with it. There was a lot of times that we had to sort of power through or stick with a situation that looked otherwise fairly bleak. So those were, I think, did I get everything? How do we start? What were the challenges? Did I miss anything there, dude?
Oh, I think that's great. Thank you, Corey. I'm sure there are probably many tears shed along the way at certain moments in time.
Absolutely.
Kristen, can you share a bit more about how Parkbridge got started?
Yeah, Parkbridge really was growth by acquisition for many, many years. The team looked at the portfolios of land lease communities across the country and looked for the best possible assets. And it was really growth by acquisition for a long time. The challenge around that is you have different teams, different corporate cultures, different systems in every single asset across the country. So you can imagine the kind of HR, environmental health and safety, and IT issues that go along with that. I think those were the biggest growing pains, was just growing a team and a corporate culture across the whole country and having it change constantly. I think the shift from acquisition, more recent shift from acquisition to developing new A-class assets in land lease, again, came with its own set of challenges, because how do you assemble a team that now becomes a developer? So there's been a lot of growth and a lot of change for Parkbridge in recent years to assemble that team, but we have now a very, very strong team on the development side. I think there's, different municipalities have been open to the land lease model. Others have had a stigma of kind of that older product type, so not as open. I joke that if we called it tiny homes, we could have, our own reality TV show, and every municipality would want us to come. But it's hit and miss depending on the municipality and the people in that constituency. We've also had previous challenges with lenders, which not a lot of our retirement purchasers require financing, but it seems like we've worked through that. We do have some great support around that now. So that's a new world, because as Daniel was saying, that's such an important piece, especially for those first-time home buyers, to be able to get into the market. So come a long way there. We have tremendous support from our ownership, so that access to capital through BCI allows us to grow as quickly as we can. It also means that we're guided by some significant mandates around environmental, social, and governance, those ESG mandates. It's wonderful to have a very high bar, but it's also challenging. Lots of support around that, and lots of learning from Quadrille, who had the highest ESG scores in diversified real estate category in Canada and in North America, and was second globally in those ESG scores. So we feel like we have lots of support around that, but ongoing challenges.
That's great. Thanks, Kristen. And Dan, can you share some, I know options has been around for a while, but share any insights on how it got started and challenges that it faced?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Jeanny. So when preparing for this, I actually, because it's been around for a long time, well before I was involved. When preparing for this, I actually got to speak with the lawyer that was fundamental to creating options, and because I don't know the founder, he's not involved in options, and I just don't know him. But it's a pretty remarkable story. I'll go through it fairly quickly, but it's a great story of entrepreneurialism. So the business came out of a period of time in the 90s when the federal government stopped funding cooperative housing. So the founder was part of the co-op movement, and all these social, housing groups folded, and people were going, okay, what do we do? There's demand for this, but we don't have any funding. And this gentleman, Mike LeBay, had this idea that if you, rather than distributing profit, if you use the profit to create a lower cost base and give people assistance in buying, you sort of divorce yourself from being so attached to government, and it becomes sustainable. It's a sustainable business model that can be scaled, and you can do it over and over again because the project itself is funding to support. So I know he tried a project, a smaller townhome project that didn't quite do what it wanted to, but the real start of options is the Distillery District, which today stands 3 condos that look as good as any of them that were built a long time ago. And Mike, like many, visionary real estate developers that have this idea in their head, but no money. This is the no money thing is a common thread in the real estate industry quite often, where it's like, where do I get the money? How do I do this? Approached all that land was owned by the Distillers Pension Fund. And he managed to convince the asset manager that was responsible for entitling these properties and selling them off, that he should sell it to Mike, to options. And because there was a zoning encumbrance on it for affordable housing, which is interesting at the time that we're in right now with inclusionary zoning. It's not particularly different, but there was an encumbrance. And I understand Mike was a very convincing character and was able to sell that to the city, that his program should qualify for the zoning condition. So he did a deal with the landowner. The landowner deferred payment till the end. He convinced legal consultants, everyone, just do this, you'll get paid eventually. Pre-sold, got quite a capital stack from what I hear. Fairly high leverage, got some mezz in there, got construction financing, brought the Del Zottos on board through Delterra, built the building, and that's what seeded options. So there were 3 of them, 2 on Mill Street, 1 on St. Lawrence. The first one was cobbled together, created a surplus, created some profits and cash that fed into the next one. And eventually the business got up and running. So it is really, like, just listening to the story, it is remarkable what's been created given how big options is now and what it's got going for it, that it just came from a convincing person with a vision.
Yeah, it's interesting. That seems to be a lot of the common thread, right? These are really, your organizations are all established, but really very entrepreneurial in its roots, right? And resilience, as we know, if you're an entrepreneur, is key. And having convincing, I guess, spokespeople who can actually convince and find people to jump on board and to believe in these new ideas. But that's really what's needed, isn't it? As kind of housing needs are changing and affordability, we need those kind of that creative thinking. But you're right, and I love all the challenges that each of you outlined that you face. Some of them common, some of them unique to your firms, but really a status quo is the Achilles heel of innovation. Love that quote. I'm going to use it, Corey, if you don't mind. No track record, municipalities, entitlements, lenders, financing, all of those things. But each of your firms has managed to overcome them, and that's a positive story that innovation is possible in our industry and in Canada. Just being mindful of the time, I want to go to the next question quickly. What is a project that you're most proud of? It'll show off a bit here. Corey?
Okay, that's hard. That's hard, but I'm proud of a lot of our projects, and it is really hard for me to pick one over the other. It's like that's to me like saying pick your favorite child. They're each unique, but I'll speak about single family rental because I think it's on topic and sort of some of the things we've gone through in the last year. It's something I'm very proud of, and we'll talk about that as this answer. First of all, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating asset class. As I mentioned earlier, it's one of the fastest growing asset classes through the U.S. and globally in real estate. It's a true brick and mortar asset class. I think long before there was any sort of investment property, there was a single family home that was rented out to somebody. So it existed, before condos and high rises and apartments and offices and all that thing. So it's one of the fundamental pillars of real estate. And yet, when we were going out to people and saying, hey, this is our idea, it was like we were speaking a foreign language. Why would you do that? It's never been done. You're kind of crazy. And we're looking at it and saying, well, everything lines up. By the way, there are 1.1 million single family rentals that exist in Canada today. It's almost 750 billion, closing in on $1 trillion in total asset value. It's about half the units that there are in terms of apartments. It's a really big asset class. It's owned by mom and pops. I call them mom and pops, so that the average person, investor, doctor, lawyer, family, whatever, that realtor that owns 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 homes, and it's very fragmented. And the same condition is true in the U.S. And for us here, we were trying to bring in some institutional management, some high quality homes in underserved markets. And as I mentioned earlier, it's almost as if we were speaking a foreign language. On the capital side, Kristen, you mentioned this earlier, and Dan, but to convince the debt markets that this was a safe and resilient project, an opportunity has been a challenge. It's been one of my main objectives for this year. It's something I spent a tremendous amount of time on. Again, I find it interesting. They loan to the asset class every single day to individuals who are buying homes, and even those individuals who are buying homes as an investment property. They also, on the flip side, loan every single day to multi-res apartment buildings, but we kind of didn't fit in one box or the other, and going through, we got basically no's across the board, and then we said, okay, we gotta talk about how we're presenting this, and little by little, step by step, we started to be heard, and we have been able to demonstrate to the debt markets in Canada that this is a strong asset class. I mean, we're speaking to DBRS Morningstar and getting the debt rated, and the main things is what's the difference to the U.S. Well, the two big differences that we have are, the fundamentals of our marketplace are objectively stronger. Vacancies are tighter. New home supply to demand is more imbalanced. It's harder to build here. Through recessions and compressed real estate markets, we tend to be very resilient in comparison to the U.S. And we also have 2 income streams per home, which is statistically a more resilient cash flow. Not to mention the other side of bringing on new supply and affordable supply was a big benefit towards the sort of ESG targets that we all have. So spending 6 months really getting the story out there properly, having people hear it objectively was a real challenge, and something I'm proud of. We're now sort of at the we have tailwinds now. We are, we're close to our first securitization of single family rental, I think, in Canada for this type of product. We're working with getting the debt rated. Again, that's a first time thing in Canada. And we're having serious conversations with all the banks. We've been able to convince a few to get to the table, and I think there'll be a lot more behind them. So.
Oh, that's great, Corey. Thanks for sharing that. Kristen, is there any project or projects that you're particularly proud of?
Yeah, I'm not going to choose the sexiest one because that's too typical. I'm going to say I'm most proud of a project called the Villas at Wesega Meadows. It's in Wesega Beach. We just finished it, so it's fresh in my mind. And thank you, Melissa. This is the rendering of the project. I think it stands out to me because our head office is in Collingwood, and I got to spend a lot of time on the sales floor. So in our pre-construction launch, I met a lot of the customers, and it is a much older demographic. I would say a 75 plus demographic. I met a lot of widowed individual buyers. I met a lot of people with health issues. I met people who were moving in because their best friend was going to move 2 doors down from them, and they knew that they were going to have this supportive community for this stage in their life. There's great amenities attached to this community, actually next door in our resort. So there's, an indoor pool and courts, and they could bring their grandkids. It was really a win-win situation in that, 66 townhomes, perfect product, serving that, I would say, more vulnerable demographic, and certainly sensitivity around affordability in the right product type. But it also delivered a great IRR for our stakeholder. So we were able to deliver the financial return at the same time as meeting all of those needs. That to me is kind of the perfect formula of it is possible, showing it as a great example. And these were people who were, quite desperate about the housing solution. It just didn't exist in a lot of ways for them, and they were able to afford the home purchase. We started, don't fall off your chair, we started selling these homes in Wesega Beach under $300,000 and a rental rate of about $530. No, you have some other fees on top of that, but that was the rent that directly goes back to our shareholder as that return. And we were able to do that and have a win-win. I also just want to shout out to our property operations team, who, when you have a team on the ground managing these assets and acting as a property manager, it gives that level of kind of safety and security. We're not the police, we're not running around as security, but certainly COVID was a great test where our teams were able to support the members in our communities. And this summer, August, tornado touches down in Innisfil this summer. And I'm on a call, literally listening to people on the call saying, I'm going to Innisfil, and to watch our team mobilize and get to our property at Sandy Cove Acres, knowing that they could help immediately make sure people are okay and clean up any damage that had happened, to mobilize. It's a really unique situation to have that level of purpose among our teams, and it's one of those proud moments when you feel like this is the right place to be right now.
Thank you, Kristen. Thank you for sharing some more insights into kind of who your clients are there. Dan, can you share with us? I know there's a lot of projects options has done, but anyone in particular stand out for you?
Yeah, I'll just give a couple quick ones that I'm personally very proud of. And I think the theme here is I view both of these as part of a community change. And so the first is a project called the Humber, which is on the Humber River. It's one of our projects that's under construction right now. And It's in Weston Village, and for those that know Weston was not a particular part of Toronto that had really gentrified or sort of started to boom. We've been in there for a while, and our project was in the market right after Rockport finished a rental property with Artscape, and we started to see the neighborhood changing. But you know, our project is a beautiful project that will be, you know, unobstructed views of the Humber River, great outdoor amenities. But I think the fundamentals for this project are pretty important. It's across the street from the UP Express, so people can live outside of the core, get to work pretty easily, get to the airport. But what's most interesting for me to see is now there's this whole MTSA area there at Eglinton, which has sparked a huge amount of development, where the next UP stop goes in, the Eglinton Crosstown goes, and we're seeing, you know, Kingset, Fengate, Choice, all these major players building up Weston Village. When we started there, it was not like that. So not that we're taking credit for making that, it's not the slightest bit the case, but Options has always been able to eye these areas that get into, and really it's because it's where the land was cheap. But it had, you could see the bones were right. And you know, the project that I'm just completing our rezoning application for, we hope to be in market on our first phase early next year, is called the Cedars, and that's at Eglinton and Markham Road. It's part of Scarborough that, again, is, if you drove through it now, it's sleepy. Like, you can't really see what's actually going on unless you dig into the applications in the area, the investments that are going on. But this has the right bones. It's a large site. There'll be about 800 units on it with multiple towers, mid-rise, high-rise, stacked towns. It's backing onto the golf course. And, you know, from our position, we're looking at this going like, wow, like this is going to transform this area that hasn't seen a lot of development. There's a huge park going in. You know, we're designing it with a substantial oversupply of outdoor amenity space to deal with people, you know, just creating a space where you can live and you can raise your family, and you're not just buying this as your first home and, okay, now I'm going to have kids, where do I go next? You're saying, no, let's create a place where people can live their life. So that's a really exciting project we're working on.
Wow, got tons of questions that I'm coming up with, but just a reminder to our audience, if you do have questions, please put them in the Q&A. We will be taking some questions at the end of the session. I know we're just being mindful of time. I'm going to combine the last couple of questions that we had discussed, panelists. So, you know, the questions really are, you know, what are some of the new challenges you see moving forward? And/or do you want to share with us kind of looking ahead for the next 5 years? Kind of what does it look like for your company, and how are you feeling about the future, inflation notwithstanding? Why don't we start with Corey again?
New challenges. I think new challenges are plentiful. We've talked about a whole bunch of them. Some of them are old challenges that have never been solved. Probably the majority of them are old challenges. You know, there's a reason why our country, of any G7 countries, is the furthest behind in terms of affordability of housing supply. I don't think it's complicated. I think that's a big part of why you know, as Andy mentioned, the political regime was so focused around housing, because it does need to change, and I think that turns into an opportunity. And I'm really excited to see where, you know, how technology evolves within our space, from building better, faster, cheaper, to being more efficient with management and everything else. There's a lot of exciting technological evolution that's happening over the next decade, and can't wait to see where that is. I don't think there's any single silver bullet in terms of opportunities, but there's micro ones within what we're doing, and, you know, we're certainly focused on those. And I'm very bullish of where we are. I think it's one of the greatest places to live in the world. You know, there's a lot of tailwinds at our backs, and you know, I'm very excited for the next 5 years to continue to develop what we've been able to start so far.
That's great. Thanks, Corey. Kristen?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I'm going to focus on the part that's exciting at Parkbridge for sure. We have such a mandate for growth that we've really looked at just how do we grow faster. So we've partnered with other builders and developers so recently, I can't even announce who that is, but stay tuned for spring of 2022, and we're able to talk about that. And we're able to, leverage the scale of other builders and developers out there to grow at quite an accelerated rate. We have a tremendous acquisition team out there, though it just seems more and more competitive for land. They're doing a great job vetting all kinds of opportunities. So we're looking at new markets, we're looking at new demographics, and we do have a project coming spring 2022 that will, for the first time, give us CMHC-backed high ratio mortgages for first-time home buyers. So we're really, really excited that that's in place, and to test that market. It makes sense to me, but it's the first time that we will have brought it forward, and just looking forward to actually bringing that to market as quickly as we can.
Thanks, Kristen. And Dan, what does the future look like for options?
Yeah, like I won't dwell on some of these challenges on the cost side. Like we're all trying to fix it. I think the future, like the immediate 4, 5, 6 years, looks great. We have a great pipeline. We have a master plan community coming eventually in Guelph. That's at the secondary plan stage. That will be an entire neighborhood, and we're also redeveloping a United Church site in Don Mills. That is interesting. It'll be a mid-rise building where we put the congregation space back into the podium. So it's just a creative way of dealing with land and finding opportunities and dealing with aligned organizations. So we could see pretty clearly what the next 5 years. So I think really what we're looking at is 15 and 20 years, and how do we get land now for down the road. So it's more of a longer term view I think we take in general about keeping the pipeline replenished and finding the right markets. We spent some time with NBLC this year doing a market study, trying to figure out where does our demographic live, because we spent a lot of time in the GTA, and now we're saying, okay, where else can this is not just Toronto, so we're also identifying markets that make sense for us outside of the city.
Wow, a lot of plans for growth amongst all your organizations. Kristen, it sounds like you've got capital to deploy and looking at partnerships, which is great. And Dan, definitely, I mean, the model applies across the country in big and small cities. It's not just big urban centers. And Corey, I love the angle on the reality is as strong as our condo market has been, that there still is this affinity and move to single family homes. And I love that each of your organizations is tackling fundamentally the issue of supply. So supply is not only physical supply, but the availability and the attainability perhaps of existing supply. So really, Corey, to your model, really rental is in some ways the new affordable housing, right? There are a lot of people, especially in Toronto, who have the incomes to be able to carry the carrying costs of single family homes, but they just don't have the down payment. So that's a great model, and adding the second suite and the co-living, having the professionally managed kind of roommate situation is interesting. Kristen, I love the land lease, the whole idea of kind of, that you can reduce the actual housing cost because the land is leased, and we know what's happening with land prices across the country. And then, the whole model since the beginning, right, is about the assistant with the down payment. And I love the kind of self-sustaining model where we probably need to start looking at ways that we can rely less on government as part of our business models. So a lot of great ideas there for sure. And so I guess we're going to jump now to some questions, because again, just being mindful of the time. We do have a question from the audience, which I'll start with. The question says, I'm curious where funding for options for homes comes from. Who are their investors or funders? So I guess that's a question for you, Dan.
Yeah, so I mean, as I mentioned, how the organization got started was really the catalyst for seeding the equity fund. So we have a related organization, a sister company called Home Ownership Alternatives, and that's where really the balance sheet is. So as projects cash flow at the end, where mortgages get repaid, all that resides at Home Ownership Alternatives. They manage the funds that go back to buy new options projects, and they manage the mortgages that purchasers have received over the years. So it's a partner organization. Other than that, we finance conventionally on the debt side.
Great, thank you. Another question we have is, who are your clients? I know, Kristen, you spoke a bit more in detail about your project in Wesega, but I don't know if Corey, can you share some more insights or into kind of what's the profile of your typical client?
Yeah, for the single family rental, it's young professionals, young families. We get downsizers, divorcees. I'd say the majority is young families, and then for co-living, it is young professionals, primarily single young professionals who are looking for ability to have an affordable way to live and also network. Network and have connection points within the buildings. What they say with co-living is people come for the affordability and they stay for the community. So it's a great place in a relatively lonely world that was becoming more and more lonely before COVID, to meet new people, to network, to have a sort of community support within the building. So it tends to lead to young professionals, although you get digital kind of nomads and a variety of people.
Mm-hmm. Kristen, I know you shared some insights into your demographic in your Wesega project, but what else are you seeing perhaps in other communities across the country? You'd mentioned before kind of downsizers. Is that a big percentage of your clientele?
Yeah, it's certainly the value proposition works for those who are downsizing, and the value proposition really makes sense for those who are just trying to squeak into the market. So kind of either end of the spectrum. Kudos to somebody who can go out and afford a single family home today. Freehold, absolutely, they should do that if they can. But for all of those people who cannot, it's really not about a certain psychographic. It's about that demographic who is willing to look at a disruptor in the industry. There are people who are a little more an early adopter and saying, yeah, you know what, it's different. I don't know enough about it. I'm going to go talk to Parkbridge and figure out whether land lease works for me. I think that's the psychographic that we're seeing. And when they crunch the numbers and sit with their family financial consultants, realtors, they realize, wow, this is going to make a difference for us in the long term. It frees up a bunch of money. We can still travel. We can still have this lifestyle, or that idea of owning a home that I thought was completely off the table. It is possible. So I think right now we're still not well known. So I think those early adopters are still who our demographic is, but I think you'll see a change, almost like condos were when they were first introduced, and there was a lot of skepticism about how does that work? Why does that make sense? I think over time there'll be a great acceptance of the model because it makes sense. It fills the need.
Oh, interesting. Dan, can you jump in quickly? We haven't got much time left, but any insights on who your buyers are, or your profile?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, as I mentioned, we primarily target first-time owners and end users. So the vast majority is going to be professionals, late 20s to early 40s, really that age group. We do get downsizers too, people that want to unlock the equity in their home for retirement, but still stay in the neighborhood that they are. Maybe they want to be close to raising their family or helping with grandchildren, that kind of stuff. But it's substantially in that first-time owner age bracket.
And we have a question that came in. Curious as to what the immediate barriers are, both Parkbridge and options for homes and for core as well, for home buyers. Is it this is for home buyers. Is land transfer tax still a barrier in these scenarios where people are trying to save on immediate closing costs? And how would paying for closing costs like the LTT work in these situations? Kristen, do you want to weigh in on that first?
Yeah, interestingly, land transfer tax doesn't apply for land lease. So we're not transferring title of the land. So There's a number of things that make it more affordable, but that's one of them. Lower cost in general, land transfer tax comes off the table. We're usually in a price point where that new home HST rebate applies. And for our true MHC communities, there's clip financing, different things available for those different product types. So that's a separate lending situation altogether that many people can qualify for, even if they can't qualify for a traditional mortgage.
Interesting. Dan, do you want to weigh in quickly?
Yeah, closing costs are huge. The down payment, 5% on $400,000 is very different than 5% on $800,000. So that number keeps going up. It's the absolute dollar value. And because remember, our business only works at market. We sell at market. Our cost is at market. We sell at market. So as the market goes up, that's becoming more and more challenging. And that's fun. That's an issue with our model that we're always trying to fix. Is we're trying to target a certain income, but as pricing goes up and that down payment goes up, it just pushes the income up. So it's a challenge. The down payment will remain a challenge as we find ourselves in an upward moving market.
Great, thank you, everyone. Unfortunately, I know we could probably talk for hours more, and I've got tons more questions I can ask each of you, Corey, Kristen, Dan, but we do need to wrap up. I want to be respectful of everyone's times. I know Andy's going to jump in, I guess, with his thoughts on today's discussion. Also, he's going to do the draw. Andy, over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Jeanhy. That was a marvelous presentation. And let me begin by just saying thank you equally to Corey, Kristen, and Daniel. It thrills me as I'm probably the oldest guy in the room, been around beaten up over 5 recessions, to see such young, brilliant minds that are going to create and lead us through the next generation of innovative and brilliant, bright ideas for housing affordability and supply. It really makes me feel really good that this leadership coming through this industry is so powerful. Corey, Kristen, and Daniel just reflect that marvelously, and I'm just thrilled about that. The overall commentary, I think, was that it was very, very insightful, really interesting in terms of the nature of how to kind of push through this affordability barrier. I think one of the interesting things that we must confront now is this actual definition of affordability. The difference between social housing, market housing is significant, and we need to, as an industry and as various stakeholders, kind of find our common ground here. When affordability gets touted about in the media and the press and the political regimes, it actually has completely different meanings from one asset class to another, and one's intent for provision of product to another. So I think this definition needs to happen. What we've been calling for over the last years, but intently in the last month or so, is a national, and it's probably more regional or provincial, because the jurisdiction on the provision of supply is really a provincial purview. So we've been calling for a national or provincial conference, bring all the stakeholders together, industry representatives, municipal representatives. Let's unlock the magic key to the supply complexity. When I listen to these brilliant minds here today, quite clearly we have the capacity and the capability to be able to do this. It's a major task. It's absolutely essential. We're competing throughout the world for both jobs, employment growth, and housing affordability is a key component to new growth within any market area, one of the areas to which Toronto is severely suffering. So we need to be able to be out in front of this. The study by Scotiabank, James, I'm going to lose his last name for a moment. I'll get it for you if you want it. But he was pointing to 1.8 million homes that were behind on a national basis in accordance with the measurement of demand. A recent study released by Ontario Home Builders Association just the other day shows us 1 million housing units required over the next several years if we were even going to catch up. So the enormity of the issue is there. Let's pull ourselves together and define exactly what we need to do to get through this. There are a ton of ideas that can be mutually beneficial to all stakeholders, from the consumer to the municipality to the industry itself. Let's have that conference. Let's get it done and pulled together and find those solutions. I think it can be a very worthwhile exercise. So in conclusion, let me thank CIBC in particular as our sponsor, our lead sponsor. The other sponsors Jeanhy co-mentioned earlier, I won't repeat them all, but the CIBC has been just tremendous in lending their name and support to this program. And without them, it couldn't happen. And we're just so very, very thankful for their participation. And I take my hat off to CIBC. It's been a great, great partner. And also to another partner whom is behind the scenes today in McEwitt Partnership Marketing, who are part of this presentation, who coordinate the Zoom component parts and the ins, outs, and the parts that make it look so professional and so well run. So thank you, Leanne, and all your team at McEwitt, Melissa in particular, who've been putting this together for a long time. So they're great. So now let me wrap it up, I think, with the draws. CIBC provides a gift certificate for lunch, your choice. It gets delivered to you. I understand. If I call your name, don't hesitate to get after Jane here at PMA Brethour, and we'll make sure we follow up and get this lunch certificate to you. So the first winner, I've got our beautiful house here. We built this ourselves. So this is our beautiful little house built ourselves. And I'll just reach in and pull out the winners are Claudia Wright from Realtors Right. Congratulations, Claudia. Sunil Huang, and that's a great one, Sunil. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Congratulations. Greg Corey from Kool-Aid Studios. Thank you for your participation, Greg, and enjoy your lunch. Stephen Moranis, my Stephen, an old friend, drew that from, the over 500 participants in this little house box today. Writing an article in the National Post regularly. If you read that, it's really well done. Helmut Strobel from Tiffany Developments. Congratulations, Helmut. So those 5 people will be all recipients of a gift certificate from CIBC to be spent at your pleasure. So thank you all for attending. It's great having you here. Watch for us coming back November the 18th. There'll be some really interesting announcements as we wrap up our year end. We're working on a quite remarkable guest speaker for that session, and you don't want to miss it. We'll see you again November the 18th at 11 o'clock. Thank you, Jeanhy Shim. You were fabulous.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. It was a great discussion. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jeanhy.